Sometimes, the person who used to text you first suddenly starts replying like you're a stranger. Yesterday, they wanted to know everything about your day. Today, they seem irritated when you ask how they're doing. And the most painful part? They may not have stopped caring. They may have stopped feeling safe enough to show that they care. Because emotional distance rarely begins on the day you notice it. It usually begins much earlier, in a moment you never saw. Maybe you said something that hurt them. Maybe they felt ignored. Maybe they asked for reassurance, but convinced themselves they were being too needy. So they stayed quiet. Then something inside them changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make them think, maybe I should stop expecting anything from this person. And once that thought takes root, their behavior can change almost overnight. But there's something even more surprising. Sometimes, emotional distance has nothing to do with you. Imagine someone who has spent their entire life learning that vulnerability is dangerous. When they feel overwhelmed, their instinct isn't to move closer, it's to disappear. They stop explaining, they stop asking, they stop fighting. And from the outside, it looks like they suddenly stopped caring. But psychologically, they may actually be trying to protect themselves. This is where people often make the biggest mistake. They chase. They ask, what happened? Why are you acting different? Did I do something? And the more they chase, the more the distant person pulls away. Not necessarily because they hate the attention, but because emotional pressure can make someone who already feels overwhelmed retreat even further. And then something strange happens. The person being pushed away starts panicking. They send another message, then another. They replay every conversation. They check the person's last scene. They wonder if there's someone else. And suddenly, they're not just dealing with distance. They're fighting uncertainty. That uncertainty is what makes emotional distance so painful. Because rejection gives you an answer. Distance gives you a question. And the human brain hates unanswered questions. So it starts creating explanations. Maybe they found someone better. Maybe I'm boring now. Maybe they never loved me. But sometimes, the real explanation is much less dramatic. They're exhausted. They're emotionally overwhelmed. They're dealing with something they don't know how to communicate. Or they simply don't have the emotional capacity to maintain the same level of closeness they had before. And there's another possibility people rarely want to hear. Sometimes, distance is not a defense mechanism. Sometimes, it's information. If someone repeatedly becomes distant whenever intimacy increases, if they disappear whenever you express your needs, if they keep you close enough to hope, but far enough to never feel secure, then the problem may not be that you haven't found the right way to reach them. You may be trying to reach someone who has already chosen distance, and that realization hurts. But it can also be freeing, because love should not require you to constantly investigate your worth. You shouldn't have to decode every message. You shouldn't have to become emotionally smaller just to keep someone close. The healthiest response to sudden distance isn't always chasing. Sometimes it's one honest question. Is something going on, or do you need space? Then listen to what happens next. Not just to their words, to their consistency. Because people can say, nothing's wrong, while everything about their behavior says otherwise. And eventually, you have to stop measuring love by how intensely someone feels, and start measuring it by how safely they communicate. Someone can care about you, and still be incapable of giving you the relationship you need. That is one of the hardest truths about human connection. And maybe the person who suddenly became distant wasn't trying to teach you that you weren't enough. Maybe they were showing you something about themselves, their fears, their emotional limits, their coping mechanisms, or simply their choice. So the next time someone becomes distant overnight, don't immediately ask, what did I do wrong? Ask something deeper. What is their distance telling me? Because sometimes, distance is a wall someone built because they're afraid. Sometimes it's a door they're quietly closing. And your job isn't to spend your entire life trying to break it down. Your job is to notice whether they're willing to open it from the other side. If you've ever watched someone suddenly become emotionally distant, share what happened in the comments. And if you want more psychology that helps you understand the hidden patterns behind human behavior and relationships, subscribe. Because sometimes understanding why someone pulls away is the first step toward understanding why you kept chasing them.